I always love getting takes and opinions from former Gator legends on where the program stands today. And today I'm super excited because we are talking with a real Gator legend, Jarvis Moss. That's right. Jarvis Moss, who blocked the kick against South Carolina in 2006. And he's going to share his thoughts on Napier and recruiting and the direction the program is headed now. Okay, so Jarvis, you came from Texas to the state of Florida. What attracted you to UF?
Um, Florida, and obviously the level of competition that those schools were playing at the time. Like I told you, Ali Coach Bowden had FSU going. Spurrier had just left, but obviously the Gators were still prominent, and we all know what the Hurricanes were doing down there, dominating Miami. So I grew up loving college football. I was one of those kids that would not go outside and even play with other kids while football games were on. So, I mean, that was attracted to me, obviously, Allie, their style of play and, the type of athletes that they had in Florida at those schools. Um, and obviously, Texas recruited me. So that was the big school there at home that I had to obviously take a look at and, kind of be serious about going and taking my college career there. And then I also visited Oklahoma, which was I went there on like a weekend just to see the campus, but it wasn't really an official visit, but we counted it as an official visit. So those are the 5 schools I considered Ali of, all the schools pretty much in the country. And so I was dating a girl at the time. You probably know the story. Ali knows the story. And her family moved from Texas where I lived, and they moved to Tampa. So when I was considering all 3 of the Florida schools, that was the closest thing I had as far as family in Florida. So it made it kind of easy for me to pick the Gators. But, when you considering all 3 of those schools, you really can't go wrong. So I was pretty blessed and fortunate, Alan.
Is it wild to see that now Texas and Oklahoma are going to be in the SEC when obviously that was very different when you were getting recruited?
I think that's cool, and I like it. It's just going to make things more competitive. And, as a competitor, you like that even if you don't compete anymore. You still like to watch the other competitors go at it. So I think that's cool. I'm sure a lot of people that like how things are set up traditionally have to get used to it. But, I don't mind shuffling things up, especially with the type of athletes they're going to bring to the SEC from those 2 schools. It'll definitely make it a lot more interesting. I like these questions, Ashley. I actually like these questions.
Oh, you do? Well, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you do. I want to know what you remember from your official visit. This summer, it's all recruiting season now, Jarvis. However, the summer is the hotbed when guys are taking their visits all over the country. And I think official visits look a little different today than they did when you were taking them. But what do you remember from yours?
Okay, definitely being a little nervous. Obviously, I did. So the cool thing with me was, being where I was ranked, typically when I would go on my recruiting trips, they would have other top athletes there, whether it would be a Chris Leak or a D Webb or Andre Caldwell or some of the other guys, even from the state of Florida that didn't end up going to UF. So that was cool to me because I was like a nerd in high school, Allie. I would like get online and look up all these top athletes around the country that were ranked high like me and see what their school was and their stats and how many championships they had won. And so by the time I got on my recruiting trip, I would be able to tell these dudes their stats and their school, and they would look at me like, well, what kind of dude is this? And just kind of showed, I was really cut like that, how I love football. So, I remember kind of being a fan of guys on my recruiting trip, like, oh man, I'm gonna be, you don't even know I looked you up. And so I definitely remember being excited about meeting top athletes and players that I had a chance to go play with, and just being treated well. Obviously, you work hard in high school to put yourself an opportunity to go to college, especially, coming from my background. That was important, or else there probably would have been no college. So, when they treat you nice and you get to eat good and, 17 years old, getting put up in hotels and people telling you this and that and promising you this and that, and it feel good. I mean, who wouldn't like a little attention for a couple weekends?
So I know, having your high school girlfriend's family being in Tampa was a deciding factor, but was there anything that happened on your recruiting official visit that you think really put UF kind of over the top?
Hmm. Well, speaking of the athletes, that year we did end up with the number one recruiting class. So I'm telling you how I was a big fan of players, and I knew we had the number one quarterback, the number one wide receiver, the number two wide receiver, the number two defensive back, the number three defensive tackle, the number one defensive end, and myself. And so it's like, man, I want to go play with those guys, and we'll have a chance to win a championship. And it worked out just like that. It's
You know,
funny. It's funny you bring up Ron Zook because Zook used to always tell me, "You're gonna make me famous one day. You're gonna make me. You're gonna make me famous one day." And I always thought about our last season. We won it all, and I blocked the kick alley, and I was just thinking, this is a lot of these players are Ron Zook's players.
They are. I mean, all of you guys were Ron Zook players. He used to tell me that I should be dating a quarterback and not a punter. So I always have fond memories of Zook as well. But when you think about, before the year before you guys came there, they won an Outback Bowl, right? So that means they had a okay season. They probably won 8 games. I'd have to go back and look it up. But then they did sign the number one class in the country. What do you think Zook was able to sell? Because it honestly wasn't the product on the field yet.
Um, that's good. That's a good question, Allie. Well, you don't really have to sell Florida. Let's be honest. At that point, anyways, we hadn't fell off the cliff, kind of where we are right now. So Florida, Spurrier left, and Florida was still high in the eyes of America. Even if it was for a couple down seasons, what they had, a couple down seasons ain't enough to bring it down. So in the eyes of athletes, I still want to go to Florida. I still want to wear that Gator. You know what I'm saying? So that didn't change at that point in time. To me, Florida was still a hotbed to go play, no matter where you were coming from. On top of, Zook was actually pretty fiery guy, but he was a player's coach. He'd make you want to go play for him. As far as instilling a certain type of discipline that we needed at that time that Urban Meyer brought us. I mean, clearly we didn't have that going for us, which we needed. But as far as making you want to play for him, having good energy and those sorts of things, I mean, I could see Zook bringing in recruits quite easily.
Okay, so your son Noah is in 10th grade. And I know that he's a really good player and that you are super involved in his training. You coach at his high school. Has he started his recruitment yet?
Um, so he's still a young player. I could see those kind of things coming down the pipe for him soon, Allie. And honestly, I've been heavily involved in his playing career up until this point. And then, there's been a couple personal things that actually popped up, and we all have things. And I'm a real one. I never shy away from those sorts of things or conversations. So this will be an interesting year, kind of where he is. He could even actually take the year off this year, and we kind of got to get back on track and see where that goes. Just some things we need to work out.
So as a dad, if you were coaching or guiding your child, what is some advice that you would give him that maybe wasn't given to you during your recruitment?
Okay, good question. Um, you know, I would certainly advise him to people that kind of care about you as a person, but obviously you could use your gut, on your different recruiting trips and kind of who's talking to you about life and you and obviously you're going to talk about football on all those trips because it's about football. Kind of listen to the coaches and get a feel, who's talking about you, the person, outside of football and what you could become you as a human being. I think that's important, especially when these kids are going off. Some of them are traveling a couple thousand miles away to go to college away from their family. So having a good support system there, coaches that actually care about you genuinely as a person and not just some athlete that they're coming in to keep the vibes. And, it's a lot that goes into that stuff. So that's what I would advise my son, obviously. being a dad, you would teach him to have a good judge of character, anyways, and that would help him out, on those trips, being able to just, give a shit or me they care or not.
So Billy Napier is in charge of Florida's program, now. And I asked you prior to us going on air here if you were familiar with Billy Napier, and you actually knew about Billy Napier before I knew about Napier. Tell me a little bit about what you knew about him prior to Florida.
Right. Yeah, I had a cousin that played for him when he coached at Louisiana. He was one of his running backs, and when Coach Napier left to go to Florida, he was actually considering bringing him, and I think he actually brought one of his running backs, but it wasn't. So my fans actually, at that time, we thought maybe Amani would get to transfer to Florida and go be with Coach Napier, but it didn't happen like that. But TCU, shout out to Amani Bailey. He should be the starting running back for the Horned Frogs, this year. But yeah, that's kind of what I know about Napier. My cousin loved him. Obviously went there to play for him. And I wish Coach Napier well. I mean, it's like the jungle in the SEC. He got some good coaches, to go against there in Georgia and Saban. So it's never going to be. You're gonna have to get lucky some. So, it's a tough job, but that's why you go to Florida as a player, as a coach. I'm sure he has that competitive spirit and wants to go there and prove he can take down the Bulldogs and those sorts of things. So, I bleed on the Blue Alley, so I'm always rooting for that. And I can't wait for my school to be back on the top. That's all. That's what I always tell people. That place in a great situation.
I think that the program is trending in the right direction, but I also think that, we are in a rebuild. You're familiar with Florida fans. Do you think that they're going to give Napier the time he needs to fully right the ship?
And I laughed inside a minute ago when you were like, yeah, the Gators won Outback Bowl, which is a pretty good season. But LA and Florida, that's
Right.
not good enough. And that ain't really going to change anytime soon. So, yeah. And so I laughed inside. I didn't tell you that when you said that, but it is what it is, whether you're an athlete or a coach, and you can change the program, whether you're at Alabama or USC. I mean, that's how it's going to go. Hopefully fans will give them time and we'll see some positive stuff this year to get excited about,
Are you expecting that things turn around this season, or do you think that we're in for another season similar to last year?
You need good players to win. So to me, it's all recruiting. If Coach Napier and the staff and really went out there on the road and got players, that's how you win, Allie. Even good coaches can't win without good players. That's kind of where it starts. Really, really hitting hard in recruiting and bringing in some players that can turn the program around. I'm a big believer in that. Coaches are super important, but a good coach will even tell you. So that's obviously a big component. So hopefully the players that he's recruited over the past couple of years are developed and ready to come out and do big things this year. Like we have Brandon Spikes, your Percy Harvins, and your Tim Tebow's. And, that's a formula for winning. So hopefully that's what we got going on now.
So NIL is obviously a huge component of recruiting now. Could you imagine if they had NIL back when you played?
Timing is everything. I try not to think about it. I did pretty good with the little money and to get paid for the NIL. I think that's important, and it should have been the case. So.
I appreciate Jarvis Moss for joining me. It's always fun to catch up with old friends and, of course, Gator legends. If you missed our video on why Florida's wide receivers may surprise some people this season, click right here.